Welcome, thinkers, to Season 4, Episode 7 of Thinking Critically, a D&D discussion. No new announcements this week, so the only thing left to say is I hope you really enjoy the episode. So, without further ado, here it is. And today I'm joined once again by Lucas Zellers. Thank you ever so much for returning to the show, Lucas. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thanks for having me back, Dan. I have styled myself now as a narrative designer.
Wow.
I know. It's very fancy. I've been working at the intersection of game design and natural history, and I'm the creator of Book of Extinction with Mage Hand Press, a best-selling DMs Guild author, host of the podcast Making a Monster, and a creative marketing professional in my day job.
Amazing. And of course, your number one credential is you were on Thinking Critically before, of course.
Of course, how can I forget? Yes, November guest of Thinking Critically, major feather in my cap.
Way up there, like right at the top, right? Yeah.
I'll move some things around. I'll rewrite this bio for myself.
Yeah. Yes, of course, Lucas was with us before talking about monsters, which will be linked in the episode description, and I would encourage everybody to check it out. It's a fan favourite, if I do say so.
Oh, great.
Yeah, indeed. However, today's topic is perhaps the other side of that same coin, extinction. So, what does that mean to you within the D&D and wider ttrpg framework?
It did come up a little bit last time I was here. Extinction is the defining scientific idea of our time. And it is at the core of what makes D&D what it is. I mean, how deep do we want to go? How long do you want me to talk? Like right out of the gate at the beginning of the show?
Like 55 minutes if you could, and then I could just put my feet up.
Gosh.
Why don't you elaborate on that? Because you just said it's the core of D&D, and I don't think I would ever find another guest to open an episode with such an audacious comment. So let's
well, that's the journalist in me. I'm running with the headline first. So first of all, extinction is probably the first thing about natural history that you would learn if you were born, I don't know, anytime after the release of Jurassic Park, or probably within about 20 years of that. We give kids plastic dinosaurs, and we're just used to the idea now that there used to be big giant things that aren't around anymore. So it's one of the primary ways in which we relate to the natural world now. So extinction is the defining scientific idea of our time. We're very used to extinction at this point. We just sort of take it for granted, but it wasn't always a part of scientific discourse. In fact, it's a fairly recent addition. Thomas Jefferson wrote in his notes on the state of Virginia that such is the economy of nature that no instance can be produced of her having permitted any one race of her animals to become extinct, of her having formed any link in her great work so weak as to be broken. And that was in 1781. And that idea wasn't unseated. Like, that was based on just the assumption of all of natural history back to Pliny in ancient Greece. And it persisted until 1796 when Georges Cuvier was the first one to suggest that the bones of the American mastodon belonged to an espèce perdue, or a lost species. And now I have tried to pronounce a French word, which is making me extremely self-conscious, but...
You're talking to an Englishman here. We're notoriously unable to...
It's probably better that I mispronounced the French, I suppose.
I wouldn't be able to tell you if it's a correct or not, so no, that's fine. You made me think there that, in a way, do you think people are maybe... numb is maybe too strong a word, but like desensitized to that now, as it's so...
Oh, absolutely.
Ingrained in our childhood that, like, oh, another animal's going extinct. Well, that's just life, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's kind of the point. We're in the midst of what Elizabeth Colbert calls the sixth mass extinction. There have been 5 of them over the course of recorded history, or rather, the historical record that we have back through time. And this is the one, the last one was the KT extinction event, or at least that's how we sort of think of it. The one that is thought to have been caused by an asteroid impact in the Yucatan, the one that killed the dinosaurs. And now we're in a place where extinction is happening at an estimated 45,000 times higher than the background extinction rate. It's incredibly difficult to calculate how often species go extinct even before this ecological situation in which we find ourselves. But the best estimate I've found is that for mammals, the background extinction rate is one species every 700 years. And I have a list of over 100 that I have been working through that go back to years with 4 digits, like what's known as the Holocene, the most recent geological epoch after humans came to prominence in the geological record. So numb is a good word. It's an overwhelming part of how we experience and interact with the natural world right now.
Yeah. I must admit, I am, apart from being into dinosaurs, my my knowledge on the subject is lacking, and it is not it's not the most glamorous of topics. Or let me rephrase that. It's not the most uplifting, I guess.
Yeah, it's hard to talk about.
For sure.
I've been digging up extinction stories for about a year now to put this book together, and there have been moments where I just I've had to walk away from my desk in tears because of what I've read. And I have found a way to be hopeful about it, and that's really why I'm here. So I imagine we'll get to that soon.
Well, that Kyrgyzstan, the YouTuber series, they did a similar kind of hopeful take on climate change as a whole, and the ending note was like, it's not all doom and gloom. There is still possibility for change.
Oh yeah, every endangered species is a success story waiting to happen.
Oh, that's so wholesome. Save that for the end, man.
I'll say it again if I have to. I have a few more of these. Yeah, it's hard to talk about because I have to bring people into the podcast right out of the way. Thankfully, we've talked already, and you kind of know me, but I have to sort of meet people and say, hey, we're living in a zoologically impoverished era, and that kind of sucks, doesn't it? And then, then we have to that's the place that we have to be, where we have to kind of have the conversation. So it's hard to do. In point of fact, the American Psychological Association recognized eco-anxiety as I don't want to say disorder or a symptom, or as a source of a kind of anxiety in 2017. It's sort of the fear that we're living on a world that will soon be unable to support the basic biological functions of life. So this is real, and it is hard to talk about. And I'm more familiar with that difficulty than most. But one of the things that I am desperately trying to do when I write about extinction, especially in the context of Dungeons and Dragons, is to write about it in a way that provides hope, or at the very least, an antidote to despair.
Let's do that classic academic tip that certainly younger teachers who teach younger generations do, and it's make the thing interesting and exciting. So the question I have for you is, obviously you've been working on both Making a Monster and Book of Extinction, and I wanted you to what kind of interesting animals have you looked at which may have gone extinct that I may not have heard of, that were probably weird and wacky to my uneducated brain?
Yeah. Okay. This is the fun part of this. This is what this is what makes this worth doing, because every extinction story that I have read has been just bonkers. Like, I couldn't have made this stuff up. So first of all, there's a few that everybody wants to talk about, right? Like, when people talk to me about extinct animals, they have their favorite. And I tried to pick a couple that were consistent favorites to put in the preview. So there's 3 of them out right now, and you can kind of see my design process for how this works. One of them is the great auk. I have the thylacine, or Tasmanian tiger, and the passenger pigeon. I think my favorite of those is the Tasmanian tiger. It was a marsupial wolf, and wolf, tiger, nor wolf, nor hyena, nor jackal are really an appropriate label for this thing.
Mhm.
But it's the best we have. It's uncanny in a way that the Feywild is uncanny. It defies description and explanation. But it was a roughly dog-sized marsupial that was native to the island of Tasmania and was, at the time of European settlement, just a major feature of the forests there. And when Europeans settled it, they brought with them the kinds of domestic animals that they knew to be helpful for setting up a life. And so the Tasmanian tiger, with its frankly huge gape, was an obvious target for mythologizing. It became the sort of big bad wolf of Tasmania, and it became responsible, although it became responsible in myth, at least, for the loss that farmers experienced of their sheep. And I don't think we had cows of their sheep. Like every sheep that got killed was the result of a thylacine attack. So there was this huge concerted effort to eliminate the thylacine from Tasmania, and most experts agree it worked. Not every, but most. The last one was named Benjamin, and he died in the Hobart Zoo in Tasmania in 1936. But the way that people talk about the Tasmanian tiger is exactly the same as the way people talk about monsters, with this weird mix of both fear and love. It has a devoted, I don't want to say fan base. I do want to say fan base. There's a huge, I've read at least 3 books claiming that it is still alive somewhere out there in the wilds of Tasmania. Living in America, we have Bigfoot, we have Sasquatch, that's our guy. And in Tasmania, it's the thylacine. So I've written the thylacine as a fey creature. It had to be, with the bizarre mix of both charm and fear effect. So it has the same frightful presence that you would find in a dragon, and the same enchanting call that you would find in a siren. Because I wanted to get at that. Like, we were scared of this thing just until we realized that we loved it. And there's a weird kind of contrast and a weird kind of dissimilarity and discontinuity.
A duality.
Yeah, between the way we talked about it and what ended up happening.
Cool. I was going to say, like, when you do these animals, do you add in like fantastical elements, or do you try and keep it quote unquote mundane? But the fact that you've given it a charm and fear, or as I think we're
Yeah. And it was kind of at issue. Like, how do we even do this book? Because I didn't want to just give you 100 more beasts to put in your book, because that would be disproportionately serving the druids in my audience. I also wanted to be able to point out the verisimilitude here and walk the line between real and fantastic. So we've decided to just do both. You'll find a stat block for these animals on the one page, and then on the right-hand page we'll have, or on the facing page, we'll have a fantastical stat block. So I've just kind of juiced it a little bit for it to be competitive in a world where magic is a selective pressure. Something that could stand alongside the monstrosities and the aberrations and the things that you find roaming around D&D. So I've done both.
Oh, amazing. So you've done, I know you've done the Book of Extinction, right? Which is what, currently the 3 monsters. I feel bad saying that term now.
Yeah, and we can talk about why we use the word monster, because I have an opinion. But yeah, I'm calling them monsters.
Okay. And then obviously we've got Making a Monster as well, obviously, that we've talked about previously. I just wanted to know what have you learned from doing this kind of unique take on homebrew? Because obviously most homebrew is either trying to make something that is in the real world that we know of, or it's a creature of pure imagination or fiction.
Yeah.
And these kind of creatures, these extinct creatures, kind of exist in this liminal space between those two states, that they did exist at one point and were the physical things you could touch and stroke, but then now they don't, and they are now, unfortunately, a fiction almost.
Yeah, their story isn't progressing, which I think is why one of the reasons that writing them as monsters is particularly appropriate. But I think the most surprising thing that I've learned from this process is that it's already happened. I'm not the first one to do this, and that's why I said at the top of the interview that it's part of the core of what D&D is. And I think there are two instances that I can point to explicitly for where this happens. And they are the dire wolf and the cave bear.
Mm.
So first of all, you, Danilo, I mean, you've been running games and you've been talking to people who make this. And I'm genuinely curious, what does the word dire mean to you as a prefix for when you stick it in front of another noun?
Like the bigger, badder version. Imagine the thing, like add 50% more size, maybe make it more spiky, and that'll do it.
Yep.
Like dial the contrast down on the color scheme, just so it's like a bit darker and grayer, and then you're there.
Yep. Yeah, and that's basically what it is. So I resisted the urge. I thought making just creatures that were extinct in the Holocene, so somewhere in the last couple, usually in the last couple hundred years. I thought that was going to be the thrust of the book, and then I started digging up these little bits of what D&D has inherited from natural history in the past, and most of them hinge on the idea of that dire creature, and that comes to us from the phenomenon of Pleistocene megafauna. So if you look at the previous geological era, the one that is before the one we're in now, animals tended to be bigger, and I mean a lot bigger.
So not just like 150%, we're talking like 250% bigger.
Oh, at least we had I just got a piece back from my artist about the Glyptodon, which was a mammal with basically an armadillo the size of a Volkswagen. We had a cheetah fully twice as large as the one you'll find now. We had a giant ground sloth the size of an elephant. Anything else? Oh yeah. We have what the project took a strange turn when I had to add a dire kangaroo.
Oh, wow, amazing.
So yeah, when D&D says dire whatever, it is inheriting the idea of Pleistocene megafauna, which really came around in the 17 to 1800s when we started digging up bones of old extinct things and being able to sort of write that down and transmit that information in a way that permitted the historical journal. So the original dire wolf, and now I'm going to mispronounce Latin, was Anacion dirus, an extinct Pleistocene megafaunal wolf. So really the word dire means exactly what you would expect it would. Bigger, hairier, darker, and probably bonier. And those, that was just the way of the world before, back during the Pleistocene era. So we have all of these remnants of giant animals that just sort of became a part of the way fantasy was written. So everything in Appendix N, a lot of it appeared, a lot of the fiction that inspired D&D appeared during this period, the 1800s, or was inheriting ideas that appeared during, the late 17, early 1800s that were generated as part of this kind of wave of natural history. I know, for example, that is the era in which Lovecraft grew up. And at a certain point, I think Lovecraft had it right, that at a certain point, sheer size is enough to reconceptualize a human's place in the food chain, from predator to prey. And in Lovecraft's case, it was perhaps to paramecium, that we became creatures so comparatively small that we were beneath the notice of the food chain entirely, and to comprehend that would be to drive you mad. So that's what dire means. That's why extinction is baked into this. And I did mention the cave bear because I've just learned that is in the back of the book. It's a little green box text that says, if you want to use a cave bear, add 60 feet of dark vision to the polar bear stat block, which weirdly means that cave bears can swim. So I don't know. I don't know that I agree there. I've rewritten the cave bear to my purposes, but cave bears were the fulcrum where archaeology turned from mythology to history. There are, and you might know a couple. There were these caves all over Europe that were known as Dragon's Cave or Dragon's Lair or Dragon's Hole. And often in those caves, you would find piles and piles of cave bear bones. And as late as 1672, there's a famous engraving by P.J. Hayne that draws cave bear bones and just calls them dragon bones. And it looks exactly like what you would find St. George stabbing with a spear. Like that's the skull that you would picture if you had sort of ripped it out. So yeah, and it took us a while. It wasn't until 1794 that Johann Christian Rosenmuller, a German anatomist, was the first one to give it the name Ursus spalius, or literally cave bear.
Mm-hmm.
So the legacy of extinction is all over the monster manual, and it's all over the way that heroic fantasy is thought about in general. Insofar as J.R.R. Tolkien is kind of the godfather of D&D and heroic fantasy in general, his idea of history was that it was always progressing downward, lesser echoes of the past, from less cool and less magic, or rather from great and awesome to less cool and less magic as we go on. And it's echoed by the opinion of natural historians of his time. So Alfred Russel Wallace, who is a contemporary of Darwin, wrote in The Geographical Distribution of Animals, 1876. And yeah, I'm giving footnotes. I'm sorry.
The GDA, yeah, I'm familiar with it. Yeah.
Oh, are you really?
No.
Oh, okay.
Just trying to sound like I know what I'm talking about, man. Hi, and welcome to the show.
He said, we live in a zoologically impoverished world from which all of the hugest and fiercest and strangest forms of life have recently disappeared. So natural history was echoing that idea of less cool and less magic as we go on. And D&D is, in a very real way, reaching back toward a more epic and more dangerous and more magical past. A giant, low saturation, probably spikier, dire past.
There's two things I want to talk about after all of that information. One is I'm petrified by the thoughts of dire kangaroos because regular kangaroos are like shredded AF, or at least can be. Like
it's for real. 8 feet tall and jacked.
Yeah, like they're like, so a dire kangaroo. Like God forbid, like whoa, he's gonna be
picture it 3 feet higher and proportionately broader.
Yeah.
And brachycephalic like a bulldog, shorter face. And that's what you've got.
Jeez Louise. That's nightmare fuel, for sure. And then also the other thing I wanted to say is this is why I love having you on the show, is because for me personally, you give me another dimension of the books. And we did that on the last episode where we talked, I think, about like the mummy. The monster in the monster manual, the mummy, and on the face of it, it's just like, lol, that's like the Brendan Fraser film, which is great. But then you kind of are like, yes, but Danilo, look, like ever so slightly more deeper, and it reveals, like, it gives you so much more context. In the same way, now we're talking about these dire creatures that, on the face of it, to me, are just like, oh yeah, World of Warcraft taught me that's just a harder version, and that's where the end of my knowledge lies. Now it's like, well, no, wait, there's more.
And it can be both, because D&D does need to have a mechanism by which things can get more dangerous, because monsters don't level up. When you polymorph, you trade your character sheet for a stat block, and the stat block doesn't improve. So it had to create kind of these Pokemon evolution chains of progressively badder monsters. I had to write out the hierarchy of bears from brown bear, or from black bear up to cave bear. But yeah, in that case, it's sort of reflecting the idea that it's using game design to reflect a reality of the world that it inherited.
We talked about it a couple of times already about, dinosaurs. As you opened the episode with, when people talk about extinct animals, a lot of people are like, T-Rexes are cool and Jurassic Park's a thing, and this is now like, that is it. And so, of course, for better and for worse, both the standard monster manual and of the expanded books as well have several creatures tagged dinosaur. Ostensibly beasts, but they are, I think, by their original names as well, right?
Yep. There's a T-Rex. There's a plesiosaur.
Yeah.
There's a Triceratops.
Yeah, Tyrannosaurus Rex, Velociraptor. Yeah. So yeah, they've all got them in there, like verbatim to the words that people would know them.
Pretty much, yeah.
So I was going to say, like, what are your? Did you ever look at those stat blocks for inspiration when you were looking at yours, or have you got any hot takes on their interpretation of extinct creatures?
By and large, I left it alone. I was trying to do things that didn't already exist in the book. I didn't want to just rehash what was there, but there were a couple instances in which my work overlapped with what's there. I straight up took the mammoth. Like, we're reprinting the mammoth because I have a point to make about how it's the Mona Lisa of extinction. The hot take, I think my favorite hot take about D&D's dinosaurs is that it got the Velociraptor right, where Jurassic Park got it wrong. In the monster manual, they are small. They're small beasts.
Tiny beasts, in fact.
Oh, tiny, yeah, rather. My bad. They are the size of a chicken, which is consistent with the fossils that we dug up. The reason that we know them as the 6-foot-long door-opening dinosaurs that Jurassic Park gave us is because they needed to put a dude in the suit, and they couldn't do it when it was that small. Like, you're kidding. Velociraptors are tiny? No, I know velociraptors. I've seen the movie.
Yeah, they're clanging around in the kitchen downstairs. And
yeah. And in fact, D&D got it right, where Jurassic Park got it wrong. So props to you, Monster Manual.
That's good. The next time anyone criticizes D&D for anything, rightly or wrongly, I'm going to go, yeah, but they got
chicken-sized
right.
velociraptors. And that means
everything else is fine. Okay, I didn't know that. I mean, I've probably looked at it before, but it hasn't ever clicked in my head until I'm looking at it right now.
It's easy to miss.
Yeah.
A lot of writing beasts like that is, and a lot of writing that is like finding the tiny little piece of the stat block to enshrine the detail about. Like, when we were talking about the giant ground sloth, the thing the size of an elephant, I gave it a burrow speed because some ground sloths in its genus were known to dig burrows that we found after the fact. So instead of like taking 25 or 50 words to tell that story, I just put burrow 15 feet. And now you have to deal with that as a DM and a player.
But I mean, I love burrow speeds as well. We're going to go back to brass tacks D&D now. But yeah, like, what's the land shark known as in the boulette?
The boulette?
Yes, yeah, like that is great to just like smash through if they're in a mine, an abandoned mine, and it just dives through the cave wall and it just keeps going underground and stuff, and the players can't chase it. I love
reconceptualizing your place in the food chain.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sharks aren't scary because they live in the wet bit.
Mm-hmm. And we're very far away.
I don't go to the wet bit, and so I'm fine. But the boulette is a shark that lives on the dry bit. Now everything is different.
But we live on the dry bit, Lucas.
That's my bit.
I did do in the last chapter, the last arc of my homebrew campaign was themed as your classic Land Before Time, an island that nobody's been to for thousands of years. And
so Tasmania, or Mauritius, where we found the dodo, or the last resting place of the great auk. Like, you're in great company as far as natural history goes.
Unfortunately, it was all trivialized by my players having a cubic gate, so they're just like teleporting everywhere and just teleported through the jungle. So all the jungle monsters were just like put in the bin.
No.
So the closest we got was essentially the glass of water shaking, the water in the glass shaking rhythmically, but then they never needed to explore or go further. So that's as close as I got to bringing them in. I was half queuing up a huge epic dinosaur fight, and it wasn't to be on this Land Before Time.
There is something kind of tragic about that. I know it's fine, but like, huge, like, come on, guys. It's like Hulk at the end of Thor Ragnarok. Big monster.
Fight the dinosaurs.
I wanted to fight dinosaurs.
So now they're back to fighting normal, boring creatures. But anyway,
Well, and that kind of catharsis was a part of what I wanted to do with Extinction, was to sort of be able to bring you into contact with these things that I knew that you were going to like. I have a giant beaver in the book. It's a beaver 6 feet high. That's just, it's there for no other reason than I know you're going to love it.
Yeah. Are you gonna? I mean, if you don't spec a dire kangaroo, I will. But please tell me it's in. Please tell me it's on the cards.
Oh yeah, it's one of the ones I've actually finished. I've got an art order out for it.
Dreamy.
And I've asked for 3 things. I've asked for giant, short-faced, and I want it to be full-on cold cocking a guy. Uh, just a mean left hook.
Yeah. Shredded, jacked up.
Yeah. Just a kangaroo punching a guy's lights out. Yeah, large beast, unaligned, challenge rating 2.
I've just thought of a great rug pull is having that Jurassic Park telling your players as the DM, you've got a glass of water, it's rhythmically, the water is shaking, and all the players are like, oh yeah, I know this, we've seen this trope a bunch of times before. And then out through the bushes hops and they're expecting a T-Rex. No, nuh-uh, not today.
No, sir.
You're wrong. This is way worse.
And it's angry.
Oh, great. That's a free, all the listeners, that's a freebie. Please take and use that in your campaign. Another thing I wanted to talk about in regards to building a D&D campaign, and you mentioned them earlier on, like extinction-level events, as Hollywood would like to call it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you mentioned we're at number 6 or something.
Yeah, that's the idea that is being put forth in the scientific discourse now. I should say that geologists recognize 5 based on their work.
Mm-hmm.
And then, we're making the argument that we are in the 6th.
Currently in it, yeah.
Yeah.
I hope it won't be one of those things where people look back and go, oh yeah, those guys were like definitely in number 6 and they just couldn't see it for whatever reason, because that'll be sad. I'd rather at least know we're in it ahead of time.
Yeah, me too. Kind of writing a book about it.
Well, I was going to say, like, have you ever dealt with or thought about those extinction events or epochs in a campaign? Usually the trope is there's going to be one if you don't stop it, players. Sometimes it's not even that big. It's just, the scope is a lot smaller. But I was just wondering on your take on extinction level events, because maybe there's a unique approach to it, or kind of those little things that people don't often think about. Yeah, the end of the world. Okay, Hollywood's taught me that it's a desolate wasteland and there's robots that stamp on skulls. But like, there's probably a little bit more nuance to it than just Fallout New Vegas.
Right. Yeah, that's really interesting. I haven't structured this book such that it's a campaign set in a post-extinction event world. So I'd be reaching to write this. I think it'd be on the spot.
Mm.
But I will say that there is at least one story. Let me tell you the thing I know I can tell you. There is at least one story of a creature that survived one extinction event only to die in this one. Actually, let me answer the question that you're actually asking, which is how do you use this in a D&D campaign?
Mm-hmm.
I have at least one example of a stone-punk setting.
Okay.
There's a book by Atlas Games called Plangea, which was used a lot of the same monsters that I'm using, but built them as part of a setting that was sort of prehistory, where everything was new and vital, and you were sort of living in the beginning, the top of the spiral that Tolkien pictured.
Mm-hmm.
So you could go hard and just do it that way. The Tomb of Annihilation adventure line in D&D owes a lot to that kind of work. The jungles of Chult are basically the land before time. That's why they're filled with monsters. So I think the tools are out there for you to do this already,
mm-hmm.
and sort of engage with extinction events as a narrative device.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is what I love doing the show. It's been a break from recording for a while, and I have missed it because it makes me all giddy about thinking. Because I am naive and ignorant, I never, it would be very cool to have I'm only realizing now is that it would be cool to have those archaeologists and geologists being and like digging up bones, and then it just gradually being this slow realization that A, there was an extinction event prior, and B, much like we are in now, perhaps there's going to be another one soon, and to have that be the driving force for the player characters to be like, let's find out what it was, and you could still have your classic sword and board fantasy of like, well, we've heard there's some ruins that were old and maybe they were pre the last event, so why don't you go in there and creatures have moved in, yada yada yada, fight your way to the end.
Right.
But the reward is like, yes, there might be some mechanical reward, but the reward is some ancient information that you then take back to the university and they go, oh yeah, this has got that last bit of the cipher or that last bit of translation that we needed to work out what's coming up next. And then you can kind of turn that campaign into there's going to be another meteorite or climate shift or something, and how the players can help to avoid that, or perhaps, depending on your point of view, and encourage it on if they're part of the like life is a cycle and with death and rebirth and all that other stuff. If you subscribe to that kind of ideology,
yeah, that'd be great. And there's precedent for it. I think those caves full of bear bones would, or bare bones, would kind of give you a good place to start.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm kind of in love with the idea of not having a BBEG. Like, there doesn't have to be a single entity. It can just be a force of nature that is just almost unreasonable. It's unforgiving. There's not much you can do. In some ways, it is inevitable. It's just, can you postpone it maybe for another for another couple
and that
of
is very
years.
Cosmic horror. And it's something I toyed with this for Book of Extinction too, because I thought about personifying extinction and then making that something that you could kill. Ooh. And I'm still not sure that's the best way to go about it. If I did, I would do something with the chytrid fungus, which is a virulent strain of fungus that is worldwide, leading amphibians and frogs to being the group of animals with the dubious distinction of going extinct the most quickly.
Oh.
Yeah, it interferes with their ability to absorb moisture or absorb electrolytes through their skin, and essentially gives them a heart attack. And it's impossible to find, it's impossible to stop, at least as far as we know now. And there are some very dedicated people working on it. But yeah, if I were to personify extinction, it would be in that line. But I'm still not sure I'm going to do it, because I think it would be more in keeping with what I'm trying to do, to just give you the tools to grapple with this and let you come to your own answers, and not have something as fairy tale like as just being able to stab it with a sword.
No, I would agree with that. I think it would be very easy to like accidentally trivialize it in a way and reduce it. It's quite reductive to bring a very real issue into something which is just like, I'm that evil guy in my castle.
And then there's the cognitive dissonance of like, I killed extinction? I killed I what?
What happens now? Yeah, that would be a tricky one. And we're going to get real meta, which I guess is saying something considering the last 40 or so minutes. And only because in my preparation for the episode, we, at the time of recording, we are still pre the new book, Monsters of the Multiverse, coming out, which, looking at my chosen online D&D platform of choice, actually, but by the time this is released, it'll be Wizards branded, so D&D Beyond. Yep. Safe now. They are basically deprecating, or that is to say, making extinct, wink, roll credits, two of the old books, Threller's Guide to Monsters and Mordenkainen's Team of Foes, and their stat blocks within. Yep. So my thought process here was like, in a way, this incessant march of time is making content and monsters, and in a way you could even fold this into your campaign, like the monsters you might have used last session and now, for all intents and purposes, in canon, not a thing anymore. Those they don't encourage you to use those stat blocks and use new stat blocks. So I just wondered, like, I know it's a slightly tenuous link, but that's welcome to the show again. No,
I think there's something there, because what I think the best comparison to make there would be the comparison between species. I made the decision in writing Book of Extinction to use Linnaeus's taxonomy for every creature I wrote about. So genus, species, name. In the case of the giant short-faced kangaroo, it's Procoptodon gallia. In the case of the Tasmanian tiger, it's Thylacinus cynocephalus. But that has introduced a layer of difficulty to this in that there's more than one giant ground sloth. There is more than one heath hen, which is, an extinct bird from the northeast coast of the US. So I think in this case, what we're looking at is maybe a deprecation of the species, or maybe sort of a loss of, I would think of it as a loss of biodiversity, where members of the genus are being removed at the species level. And we do talk when we're looking at extinction events about whether that extinction happens at the species level, whether we're just losing different variations of the same thing, or at the genus level, in which case we're losing whole, I don't want to say families, but whole large groups of life propositions that were around before. So yeah, there's a weird parallel here.
And it's funny because I've still got the search window open for dinosaurs, and in some beautiful twist of fate, the majority are marked now as legacy here, which is
really,
it's kind of like it's like a grim humor to that. So I think they get replaced with I think they get replaced with updated stat blocks. But
we're doing some rebalancing. But yeah. Things that worked in the Pleistocene do not work in the Holocene, and things that worked things that worked before the extinction event that is Mordenkainen's, Monsters of the Multiverse are no longer work in the current edition or geological era.
It's like art imitates life happening before my very eyes as we're recording this thing.
As above, so below.
Yeah, that's great. I'm really glad that these dinosaurs are marked as legacy for this content that I'm producing. Now I'm very happy I've been able to do that.
Oh no, we're making them extinct again.
Yeah. Well, they've already done it once, guys. Come on. And then we're gonna move away from monsters just for a second before we talk out the show, because of course one way to consider extinction in a D&D campaign would be, you could describe as a TPK. As in the players rather than the monsters, or the characters, not the players. God, definitely not the players. They're characters going extinct. And yeah, I just wondered what, again, a bit like how maybe you've got a unique take on how extinction events could be interpreted in your campaign, in any given campaign. Maybe there's another take on a total party kill, and how that might have ramifications that I haven't thought of.
I think at the level at which Book of Extinction operates, a TPK would be, not to sound callous, minor. I don't think that it doesn't compare on the level of an extinction event, because we haven't reached species level, and we certainly haven't reached genus level. Like, there's going to be another tiefling warlock. There's going to be another half-elf bard. It's just going to happen.
I was just going to say, you've given me the back of the box quote, which is Lucas thinks TPKs are trivial or minor, I think. So just to be the clickbait. So yeah, thank you.
Oh, great. Put that on a context and let them come for me. No, but it's, I think the point with extinction is that it is bigger than any one of us at this point. And in a way that's very D&D as well. Like, this is an asymmetrical, heroic fantasy game in which strength comes through diversity. And extinction events represent the loss of diversity, whole life propositions or ways of looking at the world that we will never have access to again. And I certainly don't mean to trivialize the idea that every person, every player character represents a way of looking at the world and a way of moving through it and solving these challenges that is on its own incredibly valuable. If you can start there and then imagine that we made extinct the very last tiefling warlock to ever be in the game, then you would find, I think, the kind of impact that the things in the book are meant to have.
Yes, thank you. Is there anything else you want to talk about that we might not have got around to yet?
Let me give you 2 reasons to be excited about this that are very much in the spirit of D&D, because I want to tell you the 2 instances in which I had to do very little writing to translate the animal to the monster. The first is the passenger pigeon. It lived in flocks of billions, literal billions on the North American continent.
Okay, for those listening, I am a shocked face. I've got shocked Pikachu face right now because I was expecting like thousands, and I'm like, oh, okay.
Nope, not a chance. They would block out the sun for days at a time. This is a creature whose life proposition was to basically have satellites everywhere. They could know exactly in which chestnut forest or oak forest in the Americas massed fruiting was happening, where there were loads and loads of acorns to just get for free, and they could then fly there immediately. It's a phenomenal bird that was totally at odds with the way in which we live our lives now. Like, we couldn't resurrect a biological storm and bring it back and have it coexist with the level of population that's in the United States now. But it is a perfect reconstruction of what D&D's swarm mechanic is trying to do. No single one of these animals represents the entire decision-making force of the swarm as a whole. And one of the reasons they went extinct so suddenly was that they're only comfortable reproducing when they're surrounded by hundreds of their closest friends. So,
oh yeah, I know that.
In
feeling.
a way,
yeah.
In a way, the passenger pigeon was what is a swarm. It's the only, maybe the only swarm to have ever truly existed. So writing that one was a slam dunk. It's already in the book.
Mm-hmm.
The other example that D&D gave me was of undeath. There is one creature in the book that I didn't expect to be at the top of the CR range, and it's the Pyrenean ibex. It's a small mountain goat used to live in the mountains between Spain and France, and it is the only animal to have gone extinct twice.
Wow.
The last Pyrenean ibex was given the name Celia. Her movements were tracked closely enough to know that she was the last of her species. One summer, a sample of tissue was taken from her left ear. The following summer, she was found crushed to death under a fallen branch. Very sad, and this is like the tragic moment. But what happened, the research team was able to take that sample and implant and do some gene editing and implanting and clone a Pyrenean ibex. Over the course of 10 years, 439 embryos were created from the original tissue sample. Of those, only 57 were able to be implanted in a host surrogate mother. Of those, only 7 resulted in pregnancies. And of those, only 1 resulted in a live birth. And that died after several minutes due to difficulties breathing from malformed lungs. Which, to me, is exactly what undeath looks like.
Jeez, yeah.
So I was given, by history itself, the story of an undead lich that happens to be a goat. And very quickly, it ranked its way all the way up to a CR20, CR22 if you encounter it in its lair. So D&D just gave me the way of talking about this in a way that's cool and interesting and useful to have a good time, rather than inherent or rather than only tragic and depressing. And I want you to be able to put this in your game and talk about it and interact with these stories and tell them in a way that's able to get at the details and sticks in your mind in the way only D&D's real-time storytelling can. So I was very grateful to see, and I'm really excited to continue doing this work for the other 100 or so monsters on my list, to be able to give people a way of talking about extinction, of experiencing it, of staying with the trouble that doesn't drive them to despair.
Yeah, that's such a great thing. I've lost the superlatives to describe. I'm just, because all I'm thinking of is like any given D&D game, and there's all players, they're all happy, having a fun time, having a fight with some creatures, and that's where we learn the session. The DM stands up and says, "Hey guys, you know those creatures you were just fighting? They're actually based on this, and here's the cool story about how we tried to clone this extinct this extinct goat. And if you want to find out more, go and do some research." And then we'll be like, "That's a sick story, and I want to learn more." And it's such a unique and interesting way to have those experiences, as you've just said.
Yeah. Or better yet, turn it to the other page. Like, I want you to have this book at your hand and turn it around and be like, yeah, that thing you just fought, this is it. Her name was Celia. And this, like, I've written the story for you. I want you to hear this.
Amazing. Yeah. So, wow. This is why I love having you on the show is to elevate thinking critically from just, how do you feel about hit dice? Well, I can take him or leave him, really. To do you roll for stats or not? Like to another a dimension. I won't say another level, but another dimension, a different point of view, which is fantastic.
Well, thanks, Dan. That's really encouraging. I'm glad it's working for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is what I'm here to do.
Is there anything you would like to promote, or in any ways other people can support you in this endeavor?
Yeah, so Book of Extinction is, a part of it is out right now. You can go and get it at scintilla.studio/extinction. It's also on DriveThruRPG and the Mage Hand Press website. You can have that preview as a pay what you want download, and anything that you pay for it, I'm not going to keep. I'm partnering with the Center for Biological Diversity, which is an advocacy organization based in the US that advocates for endangered species and habitats. And everything that we raise through the preview up until the time of the Kickstarter is going to go to them 100%. And they're going to turn that around and use that in their work. Again, I think the best antidote for despair is action. I didn't want to give you things that challenge your hope and things that challenge your sense of tragedy without giving you a way to give directly into it. So that's what the preview is meant to do. It comes with the thylacine, the great auk, and the passenger pigeon, as we've talked about. And you can put those in your game right now. And the full book is coming to Kickstarter.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, perhaps I'll have to have you on at that time again, and then we can, I think that would be a good time.
Yeah, I'd love to drop in and give the wrap up. By then, I will have, God help me, finished 100 of these monsters, and then I'll be able to tell you, like, how did it go, and how much were we able to donate?
Yeah.
And what did people actually really enjoy about this piece? So, yeah, I'd love to come back if you'll have me.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, as usual, all the links will be in the episode description. I would very, very much encourage. Lucas is exceptionally hardworking and exceptionally knowledgeable, so please go and check out the stuff. And even more so, it's all for a good cause. So, like, why would you not? So the only thing that's left to say from me is one final thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure. Really glad to be here, and I'm really glad to have been able to take the time to talk through this in a long form way. It's a lot to unpack, and thanks for being a good audience about it.
No worries, my
Giving
pleasure.
me some stuff to think about.
Oh, good, perfect. See, I've provided some value as well, which made my day. Thank you to everyone for listening at home. Please review, like, and share. If you like what you've heard today, you can go and check out our monster episode, which I'll link in the description, which we covered a whole different, as I said at the start of the show, the other side of the same coin. So if you like today's content, please go and check that one out. That was also very, very good. Otherwise, thank you all for listening, and good night. And now it's time for the Patreon shout-outs. Thank you to Robert Hartley, DM for Viva la Dirt League and writer on the D&D Logic web series. I would encourage everybody to check him out at Robert Hartley GM on Twitter and Twitch. Thank you to Optional Rule, a two-time guest of the show and a very insightful and knowledgeable source of information. Please check them out at www.optionalrule.com. Huge thank you to a great friend of the show, Matthew Perkins, who's out there making hilarious and educational Dungeons & Dragons content. Please go and check out his stuff at matthewperkins.net, where you can find links to all of his socials and all of his content, including his own Patreon, which I would very much encourage you to check out. Thank you to Matt Street at mpstreet88 on Twitter for supporting the show. If you need support running your personal or business schedule, head to virtualtimehustle.com or on Instagram to make that difference between should do and done. Boss it better with support from Kat, who will help you get back that essential time you've been searching for. If you would like to support what we do and get 4 shout-outs a month, head over to patreon.com/thinkingcritically, or you can just buy me a coffee at ko-fi.com/thinkingcritically